what happens when the people who spend their lives saving others suddenly find themselves unable to save their own future? That question seems to be hanging over Call the Midwife Season 16 because the next chapter of the story may push the midwives further than ever before. After years of emotional births, heartbreaking losses, and constant change inside Noneta's house, the series now feels like it's entering one of its most uncertain periods yet. And honestly, the biggest challenge this time may not come from one tragic patient or one difficult delivery. It may come from the fear that the entire world around these characters is changing faster than they can keep up with. The ending of Season 15 already hinted that nothing will stay the same for long, and now Season 16 looks ready to test every relationship, every friendship, and every belief the midwives have held onto for years. Because even though hope has always been at the center of the show, the future suddenly feels fragile. And that's exactly why fans are so nervous about what comes next. One of the most interesting things about Call the Midwife is that it has never relied on huge twists or shocking cliffhangers to keep people invested. Instead, the show slowly builds emotional tension through its characters and their everyday struggles, which is exactly why Season 16 already feels so important before it has even arrived. By the end of Season 15, there was this strong feeling that the world of Nonata's house was beginning to shift in a major way. Not because the characters stopped caring about each other, but because life itself was pulling them in different directions. And now, with medicine evolving, society changing, and personal responsibilities becoming heavier, the midwives may be facing the most emotionally exhausting chapter of the series so far. The biggest challenge moving into Season 16 seems to be uncertainty. For years, the team at Nonata's house worked as a family. Even during difficult moments, there was always a sense that the group would somehow hold together. But now that feeling appears less certain than before. Some characters are growing into new careers, while others are beginning to question what they truly want from life. And because the series is moving deeper into the 1970s, the world outside East London is changing rapidly as well. Hospitals are modernizing, communities are changing, expectations around women, marriage, and motherhood are evolving. That means the traditional way the midwives once worked may no longer fit the reality around them. At the center of all this emotional pressure is Sister Julienne, who may end up carrying the heaviest burden of all. She has always been the calm voice holding everyone together, especially during moments of fear and heartbreak. But Season 16 could finally push even her to the limit. After losing important members of the community and watching the structure of Noneta's house slowly weaken, she may begin questioning whether the mission they fought for can truly survive in this new era. And that possibility alone creates a very emotional conflict because Sister Julienne represents stability. If she begins to lose confidence, the entire foundation of the group could start to crack. At the same time, characters like Trixie Franklin are entering completely different stages of life. Her growing responsibilities at the Lady Emily Clinic already showed how much her priorities are changing. She is no longer simply the ambitious young midwife trying to prove herself. Now she's balancing career pressure, marriage, motherhood, and emotional responsibility all at once. That creates a different type of tension because Trixie may begin realizing that success also comes with sacrifice. The more her professional life expands, the harder it becomes to remain connected to the world she originally came from. And Season 16 could explore whether she's truly able to balance both sides of her life without losing herself in the process. Meanwhile, the emotional absence left behind by Sister Monica Joan may continue affecting everyone even after her storyline reached its heartbreaking conclusion. Her presence was always deeply connected to the emotional soul of the series. She represented memory, tradition, and the history of Nonata's house itself. Without her, the atmosphere of the show suddenly feels quieter and more uncertain. And that emotional gap could become even more noticeable as the remaining characters struggle to move forward without one of the people who shaped their lives for so long. Another major reason why Season 16 feels so different is because the series may begin exploring larger medical and social changes than ever before. During the early years of the show, the focus was often on communities struggling with poverty and limited healthcare. But now Britain itself is changing rapidly. Medical technology is advancing, public attitudes are shifting, and younger generations are starting to challenge older traditions. That means the midwives may find themselves caught between two worlds, one built on compassion and human connection, and another increasingly focused on systems, efficiency, and modernization. And honestly, that conflict could become the emotional heart of season 16, because the real danger may not be one single tragedy. It may be the slow feeling that the warmth and closeness of Nonnatus house is beginning to disappear. Even though the characters continue helping people every day, they may secretly fear that the world no longer values their work in the same way. And if that fear grows stronger, the season could become one of the most emotional and reflective chapters the series has ever delivered. As Call the Midwife moves deeper into season 16, one thing may become painfully clear very quickly. The hardest challenge facing the midwives might not come from outside pressure alone. It could come from the emotional strain building quietly inside the group itself. Because even though the women of Nonnatus house have survived years of tragedy together, there are signs that exhaustion is finally starting to catch up with them. And for the first time in a long while, the team may not fully agree on what the future should look like. One of the reasons this conflict feels so important is because the series has always treated change as something deeply personal. Every new law, every medical advancement, and every social shift eventually affects the characters emotionally. That's why the transition into the 1970s feels heavier than previous time jumps. The world is modernizing faster than ever, and some of the midwives may begin wondering whether compassion is slowly being replaced by efficiency. Clinics are becoming larger, hospitals are becoming busier, procedures are becoming more technical, but at the same time, patients still need emotional support, understanding, and human connection. And that creates a powerful conflict because the heart of Nonnatus house has never been about machines or systems. It has always been about people. That emotional divide could especially affect Nurse Phyllis Crane, whose practical nature has always helped keep the team grounded during difficult situations. But season 16 may finally place her in situations where experience alone is no longer enough. Younger medical workers entering the profession may challenge older methods, and Phyllis could begin feeling as though the values she spent years protecting are slowly fading away. That kind of storyline would fit perfectly with the emotional direction the series seems to be heading, because it's not really about whether progress is good or bad. It's about the fear of becoming irrelevant in a world that no longer slows down for anyone. At the same time, the personal lives of the characters may become even more complicated than before. Rosalind and Cyril's relationship brought a rare sense of happiness during recent events, but even hopeful relationships in this series are never completely free from pressure. Financial struggles, career uncertainty, and emotional distance could begin testing even the strongest couples. And because the show has always approached relationships realistically, season 16 will likely avoid easy solutions. Instead, it may focus on the quiet sacrifices people make to protect the ones they love, even when those sacrifices slowly break them emotionally. Another storyline that could become incredibly emotional involves the younger generation of nurses and trainees entering the community. Throughout the series, new arrivals often brought energy and optimism into Nonnatus house. But this time, things may feel different because the environment they're entering is far less stable than before. Instead of joining a confident and united team, they may step into a workplace filled with uncertainty and emotional exhaustion. That could create tension between older and younger characters, especially if newer nurses begin questioning traditions that the senior midwives still deeply believe in. And honestly, that generational divide could become one of the strongest parts of season 16, because the older midwives carry years of emotional scars, while the younger generation may arrive believing they can change everything quickly. Both sides may have good intentions, but their views on medicine, family, and responsibility could clash in painful ways. The older nurses understand the emotional cost of this work because they've spent years carrying grief they rarely speak about. Meanwhile, the younger generation may still believe passion alone is enough to survive. Watching those perspectives collide could lead to some of the most powerful conversations the show has ever explored. At the center of this emotional storm may once again be the East End community itself. One thing that has always made Call the Midwife feel special is the way ordinary families remain connected to the larger story. And season 16 will likely continue showing how social and economic struggles affect everyday people. Rising costs, overcrowded housing, and limited healthcare access may place enormous pressure on struggling families. But unlike many dramas, this series never treats these people like background characters. Their stories become emotional mirrors for the midwives themselves. That means every difficult birth, every medical emergency, and every heartbreaking decision may carry even more emotional weight this season because the midwives are no longer simply helping patients survive difficult moments. They are also trying to protect the idea that compassion still matters in a rapidly changing world. And the more pressure that builds around them, the more difficult that mission may become. There's also a strong possibility that Season 16 will explore loneliness in a much deeper way than previous seasons. Several characters now seem emotionally isolated despite being surrounded by people who care about them. Some may struggle with grief they haven't fully processed. Others may quietly fear that their best years are behind them. And because the show rarely uses dramatic speeches to explain emotions directly, those feelings often become visible through silence, hesitation, and small moments of vulnerability. That subtle emotional storytelling is one of the reasons the series continues connecting so strongly with audiences after all these years. By the middle of Season 16, the biggest question may no longer be whether Nonnatus House can survive physically. The real question could become whether the people inside it can emotionally survive the weight of constant change. Because every character now seems to be standing at a crossroads between holding on to the past and stepping into an uncertain future. And the painful truth is that not everyone may be ready for what comes next. By the time Call the Midwife Season 16 reaches its final episodes, the emotional pressure surrounding the midwives may become almost impossible to ignore. Because after months of personal sacrifices, difficult medical cases, and growing uncertainty about the future, the characters could finally reach a point where they are forced to make life-changing decisions. And what makes this season feel so emotional is that the danger may not come from one shocking disaster. Instead, it may come from the slow realization that the world they once depended on is disappearing piece by piece. One of the strongest possibilities moving forward is that Nonnatus House itself may face its biggest identity crisis yet. For years, the building represented more than simply a workplace. It was a home, a shelter, and a symbol of stability for both the nurses and the local community. But as hospitals expand and healthcare systems continue modernizing, the traditional structure of the midwives' work may begin to feel outdated in the eyes of officials and decision-makers. That creates an incredibly painful conflict because the people making those decisions may only see numbers and budgets, while the midwives understand the emotional reality behind every family they help. And honestly, that emotional divide could become the true heart of Season 16, because the series has always been about human connection first. Even during its darkest moments, the show constantly reminds viewers that kindness, patience, and compassion can change lives in ways medicine alone cannot. But now, the characters may find themselves trapped inside a system that no longer values those things the same way. And if that happens, the midwives may have to fight harder than ever to protect not only their jobs, but the very purpose behind their work. Sister Julienne will likely remain at the center of that struggle. Throughout the series, she has carried enormous emotional responsibility without ever fully showing how heavy that burden truly is. But Season 16 may finally push her into a situation where quiet strength is no longer enough. Watching people leave, watching traditions disappear, and watching the community change around her could slowly wear down even her patience and faith. And what makes that storyline so powerful is that Sister Julienne rarely allows herself to break emotionally. So if viewers finally begin seeing cracks in her calm exterior, those moments could become some of the most heartbreaking scenes the series has delivered in years. At the same time, several characters may begin questioning where they truly belong. Trixie's future could become especially complicated because her growing career opportunities may continue pulling her away from the life she once knew at Nonnatus House. She has spent years trying to balance ambition with compassion, but Season 16 may force her to decide what kind of future she really wants. And the painful part is that no matter which path she chooses, something important may still be lost along the way. That's the emotional reality this show handles so well. Life rarely offers perfect answers, and sometimes even good decisions come with heartbreak attached. Meanwhile, the younger nurses may begin stepping into larger responsibilities much sooner than expected. But instead of feeling exciting, that transition could feel overwhelming because they are inheriting a world filled with emotional exhaustion and uncertainty. Some may struggle under the pressure. Others may make mistakes that deeply affect patients and families. And because the series always treats medical situations with emotional realism, those moments could leave lasting effects on the characters involved. The emotional consequences of failure have always been an important part of the show, and Season 16 may explore that more deeply than ever before. There's also a strong chance that the season will continue exploring how loneliness affects people differently. Some characters may isolate themselves emotionally in order to stay strong for others, while some may desperately search for connection during painful periods of change. The beauty of Call the Midwife has always been its ability to show that even small acts of kindness can completely change someone's emotional state. And in a season filled with uncertainty, those quiet human moments may become more important than ever. Another reason fans are so invested in Season 16 is because the series now feels like it's standing between two eras. One era represents tradition, familiarity, and the emotional warmth viewers have loved since the beginning. The other represents change, modernization, and an unpredictable future. And the midwives themselves are caught directly in the middle of that transition. Some may adapt, some may resist, and some may quietly realize that they can no longer hold on to the past forever. But even with all this uncertainty, the heart of the series still seems intact, because underneath the fear, grief, and emotional pressure, the story continues reminding viewers that hope survives through people who refuse to stop caring about others. That message has always been the emotional foundation of the show, and it may become even more powerful during Season 16. No matter how much the world changes around the midwives, their compassion continues giving meaning to the lives they touch every single day. And that's exactly why this upcoming season feels so important. It's not simply about whether Nonnatus House survives another year. It's about whether the people inside it can continue believing their work still matters in a world that seems determined to move on without them. And if Season 16 truly explores that emotional conflict the way it seems ready to, this could become one of the most powerful and heartbreaking chapters in the entire history of the series. And that's all for today's video. What do you think will happen in Season 16? Will the midwives find a way to protect the future of Nonnatus House, or are even bigger changes still coming? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more updates on your favorite shows.